Hello and welcome to Console Cowboys. So today we're going to do another live over-the-shoulder shadowing of me doing physical penetration testing activities. In this case, we're going to look at access control on a typical door that you would see either on the street or inside a shared facility on suite doors to different businesses, how we would bypass the access controls on that, determine what those access controls are, figure out our assumptions and make sure that we are correct and what tools to use in order to do it, and a bunch of other things around that. So if this material is useful for you and you're learning things, shoot me a comment below and let me know what's up, as well as share it out on your social media so that other people can enjoy it as well. So let's get started. Now, this video I have in front of me is from an appointment that I had this morning, and I walked through this door and I was like, this is a perfect example of what these guys are going to see on a physical penetration test and the things that they're going to have to bypass. So let's take a look. Now, I want you to pause the video and I want you to look at this door and determine all the things that you think might be a possible issue, how you would bypass that, and then figure out what tools you would use to bypass that. And then I'm going to go through it now. So if I'm looking at this door, the first thing I see here is I see these little circles at the bottom. Now, this is likely a lock at the bottom with a little thumb turn. You'll see these a lot as you're leaving storefronts. They tend to lock these at night. And then also I see that it's a double door. So it has a handle right here on both sides, and it has a gap down the center because there's no center pole. So I could probably stick things through there. I also see some magnets up top. Now, these magnets are probably associated with some sort of access control system, whether it's a request to exit sensor above the door, request to exit buttons on the poles on the side of the door, or this keypad over here. So we scroll in a bit, we could see a little keypad and we could see an intercom system. So you might be able to press a key and disengage that, or you might be able to call on the monitor with some kind of pretext or social engineering, and they can disengage it there. So those are the things that I'm seeing from the outside. Now, how do I determine what these actually are? Well, there's a couple different ways to do that. There's auditorially, there is more of a high-tech solution, and there are some low-tech solutions. So low-tech solutions, first off, we have a glass paneled door. So we could just walk up and try to look down and look for a thumb turn. We could try to look up and look for a request to exit sensor. If we were looking for one of those, it would look like this. This is just based on like motion and temperature. And when it sees someone coming towards the door, senses them, it will disengage the magnets up top. So those magnets are engaged really tight and we can't pull them. They're stronger than what we can pull. And when the request to exit is triggered, it will release those magnets and we can open the door. So if we were to walk up to that door, pull the handle, it's not going anywhere, but we see a gap in the center of the door, it's because those magnets are stopping us. So this request to exit will release those magnets and allow us to open up the door. So we want to look up and get really low, look up, see if we can see that above the door, and see if we can see around these panels for some kind of request to exit button on either side. So that's our super, super low-tech solution and something we could do on these doors. Now, also auditorially. So if I'm pretending to be on my cell phone outside this door in the facility in front of the suite, or maybe I'm outside in the street here, and I can listen for a clicking sound, right? And that clicking sound, you'll sometimes hear when the request to exit opens and releases some kind of access control mechanism, whether it's a latch or the magnets, etc. You may or may not hear that, but if you do, that's likely what's going on. It's somebody walking inside the building across that request to exit sensor and triggering it. And that means that the door is now open as well. So you can just grab that handle probably and walk right in unless there's other controls. So that's another thing to think about. It might be an easy win if you're walking up towards that door and you hear that. So that's how to tell that that request to exit is also there, potentially. And then another way is more of a high-tech solution, and that would be having a little borescope. So you got this little guy here. You have a gap through the center of the door. We could stick that camera through the door, and we can see on our phone what's on the other side of the door. So we're going to, stick it through the door, face it up, look for the request to exit sensor, face it down, look and see if we see that thumb term so that we can check that our assumptions are correct. Stick it straight through, look one side, look the other side, look for a request to exit button, because those are all things that we can attack. So we're looking to figure out if what we think is there is there. We can also just observe the door and how people are using things, and that might give us a determination of what's going on as well. We probably already did that while we were doing some, long distance recon. Right now we're doing some close distance recon. So those are there. Now, how do we attack those? So first off, we have the locks at the bottom. So we have to think about, okay, well, we have a gap in the bottom of the door. And we also have a keypad here, which might be a lockbox and might have some keys in it. So if we can use the keypad on there to open that up and grab a hold of a key, maybe it's worn out buttons and we could tell what the combo is, or maybe there's a easy wafer lock or standard key-to-like system that we can open this up with, then we can use that to open up those locks down there. The second way to do that would be a J-tool. So we got one of those here. So this guy would stick vertically through the gap in the door. We would turn it, pull it towards the door, and then we have this little thing right here that we turn, which spins the little thumb turner, and we can open up that lock with that. So that would be a couple different ways to bypass that. Then we have to think about, okay, how do we disengage these magnets up here if those are engaged and we can't open that door? Well, we had our request to exit up here. So in order to trigger that on the other side of the door, one, we talked about, well, if somebody walks in front of it from the inside, we can do it. Or we could tailgate in, obviously. We can also engage it from the other side of the door by using a little guy like this hooked up to a canister of like compressed air. And we got this tube that we stick through the door and up in front of the sensor. We blow the cold air through there, and then it will trigger the request to exit sensor and disengage the magnets, and we can pull open the door, right? So that looks like this. We have these canisters that hook to the bottom of this, and we have that long tube. Now, these are great because they fit in your pocket and they're small, but if you don't have one of those and you can't bring those canisters on the plane with you or ship them to your hotel in time, we can just go to something like Office Max or Walmart, etc., and get some kind of computer dust spray. And if we flip those upside down, they will blow a stream like a cloud of cold air. We could just stick that through the door, shoot that through, and it will do the exact same thing as our custom tool right here. So that's just another option, and that will disengage it. Now, another option, this keypad over here might be RFID. If it is, we could stick our fake reader, get the keypad from somebody, type that in and get in there. Or again, guess a keypad based on it being worn out, maybe trigger and disengage these. Or if it's a request to exit button and we have it on these poles here, we can get something similar to this, but just a piece of wire. And we can bend it shaped like this, where we stick it through the door and turn it and pull it back. But we're going to have to make it really long and big to reach all the way to the poles on the side. So we have to stick it through, try to do it, readjust it, stick it back through, and it'll take a little bit of trial and error, but we might be able to just pull that request to exit button. Another way potentially would be if those request to exit buttons, sometimes they use RF frequencies when they're pressed to talk to the controller or talk to the release mechanism. So if we see somebody walk out and press one, or it's open during the day, we can press it and record that signal, the RF signal. We can replay that potentially if at nighttime they are not shutting down the request to exit button signals or stopping listening to those signals. Or the RFD should be disengaged at night as well. So if those things are still on at night, we can attack those after hours as well via RF or during the day. So that's another way to attack those. And then another way too, if this is open during the day and we walk in and we see those magnets up there, you can stick something between the magnets, like a couple sheets of plastic, maybe taped down, and that will make the magnet so it's not very strong, because you don't need too many layers between the magnets before they lose their strength. If you were to put those up there later on, it might be less strong where you can just pull it open. So that's another thing to think about. So those are a bunch of ways to attack that. And also you have this intercom system here. So you could also come up with a pretext of why you need to get in the building, it might potentially get somebody who will let you in and disengage these magnets from inside. So those are a bunch of ways to attack what we're seeing here. So typically on these interior doors on shared facilities, you have this request to exit set up almost every single time you have these doors. Now they might not be see-through, they might be wooden doors. And if they're wooden doors and you can't see inside, a lot of times you can hear that auditorial click, or the latch in the center, you can still slip that, etc. And you can see those carriage bolts. So remember the last video where I looked on the other side of the door with magnets, had these big carriage bolts. So you have a wooden door with the big carriage bolts on each side of it. It's a double door like that. Then you probably have those magnets attached right there, and there's probably a request to exit sensor on the other side. So that's another way to tell, as well as the other ways we talked about. So let's take a look now at what's actually here. So if I go forward here, we're going to look down and we're going to see, yep, we have a gap in the door right here. It goes all the way down. The mirror, we don't really see it as good down here, but it goes all the way down. And there's a gap down there. And then if we walk inside, we can see the gap pretty good. And as this door shuts in the light, you could see the little turn right there, a little turny thing right there. You can kind of see it as it's closing, and then you can see a pretty good gap in that door all the way up. And if we look up top, we scroll back a little bit, we can see this guy right here, which is this request to exit button right there, or request to exit sensor rather. So this request to exit sensor is exactly what we're trying to attack by putting that little tube through there and blowing it. So we just stick it right here, blow it right underneath, and it would think that it's somebody coming towards the door. They're not that smart. There are different ones. Some are temperature, some are motion, some are looking at the shape of people and like trying to determine things. But most people don't use those, and they're harder to get and they cost more. So most of the time it's just kind of like motion temperature. So that should be all you have to worry about. So that is mostly what I wanted to show you today. And the reason being is because this exact door setup is typically what you're going to go up against, especially in a suite door. If you walk in a facility and there's all these different businesses, they generally just have suite door like this, then the next one, then the next one, the next one. Then they'll have an RFID reader on the side that will trigger the REC sensor inside as well, open up the magnets, but you can also trigger it from the outside with the tools that we talked about, using the boroscopes, using these guys right here to spray, and all the other things like that. So hopefully that gives you a little more perspective now of how to look at something that looks like, oh, that's not a way in, that looks secured, I need to tailgate. No, you don't really need to tailgate. There are multiple ways past this door that are much better than trying to tailgate, getting yourself burned when someone questions what you're doing. There's a time for social engineering, there's a time for tailgating, but if you can just bypass the thing, do that first, then try those other attacks that might get you burned later on. So hopefully that is useful for you, and I will catch you in the next video. Again, like, comment, subscribe, share this out on social media, and let other people know.